Hello, welcome to Keep Leading Live. This is the live edition of the Keep Leading podcast, where we look at leadership subjects and the ideas about leadership development and insights for my listeners. I'm Eddie Turner, the Leadership Accelerator. I work with leaders to accelerate performance and drive impact through the power of executive coaching, masterful facilitation, and keynote speeches. I'm broadcasting today on usually LinkedIn. Don't think that was going to work, but Facebook and YouTube. This is a part of the C Suite Network. So on C Suite Radio, you can access this, or wherever you download podcasts. Within a week or so, we'll have that live there. And this is available on Spotify as a video as well as the audio for you to be able to replay later. So we'll encourage you to access the show later on in that respect. And if you're not following my guest today, I'm going to encourage you to do that. This is someone who you definitely want to know. Now, here's the reason why. This is a Keep Leading podcast. It's all about leadership. And I've examined many aspects of leadership. And everyone has definitions. And I even took one of my most fulfilling programs I ever took in my life was about the art of leadership. Well, today I have a gentleman who has done research on the science of leadership. What does that mean? Why does it matter? Why should you want to read this new book that he's released with that precise title? My guest today is Dr. Jeffrey Hull. Dr. Jeffrey Hull and Margaret Moore have written the book, The Science of Leadership. And we're going to look at the systematic elements that they have compiled that allow you to process what effective leadership looks like. And Dr. Jeff Hull is no stranger here on the Keep Leading podcast. He is one of my few repeat guests. So when I saw that he had this new book coming out, it's right in harmony with everything that I'm passionate about. I had to interview him. So I'm grateful that he accepted my interview. Jeff, welcome back to the Keep Leading podcast.
Thank you, Eddie. It's a pleasure to be back with you again.
Thank you for agreeing to come back and be with me. Tell our listeners who don't know who you are just a little bit about yourself.
Well, like everyone else, I have a long, convoluted resume, but the simple version is I am currently the executive director of the Institute of Coaching, which is a global association of coaches affiliated with Harvard Medical School. And I am also a leadership coach like you. So a good portion of my time is spent coaching leaders all over the world. And then finally, I do some writing. As you mentioned, a new book just came out, my third book. And I also teach Harvard Medical School part-time at NYU. And I recently started teaching part-time in Berlin at ESMT, doing some programs there. So a little combination, I guess they call it the portfolio career, writing, teaching, coaching, all the great stuff.
Yeah, but what's beautiful is your writing, teaching, coaching, they go hand in hand. And so when you're teaching, you're bringing real world evidence to the classroom that is practical, not just we need that hardcore academic component, but you're able to blend the two, and you're a true citizen of the world, truly traveled across the globe, and all of that shows through not only your examples that you share, but also in your writing and the depth of your research that isn't just focused on one hemisphere, as sometimes we might fall into the trap of doing. And therefore, this book is truly something that everyone can benefit from because it has global application. So to that end, tell us, you and Margaret Moore, who I'm also a tremendous fan of, decided to combine your years of experience to write this book. How did that happen?
Well, obviously these things, it's a long, convoluted story as to how it all fell in place, but Margaret Moore is one of the co-founders of the Institute of Coaching. She has a very long celebrated career in research and science. She was actually a biotech executive before she went into the coaching space. And then I have a psychology background and was an executive coach and psychologist for a number of years before I joined the Institute of Coaching. So together we have been working, bringing the science of coaching to coaches for over a decade. And we started having a conversation with a publisher a couple of years ago around the lack of access that leaders have, not just coaches, but leaders, to the latest and greatest research on what makes leadership effective. And we all discussed with the publisher the fact that there are so many academic publications over the last 20, 30 years of research that look at different components of leadership. And they are then written up in academic journals. And they're really interesting if you like reading academic journals. But the reality is that the vast majority of day-to-day leaders, and you know this as well as I do, the people we coach, they don't have time to read academic research. They know that it's there. They get a little summary here and there from Harvard Business Review or from Forbes. But in general, the academic research that has been building strongly over the last decades is really not accessible or not day-to-day usable for most leaders. And so Margaret and I decided, with the support of our publisher, to basically go through a summary of all the research in the last 20 or 25 years around leadership effectiveness, all the studies. And we did not read 15,000 studies, but what we did do is we went through the bulk of the majority of studies in the last 5 years on all the different topics related to leadership. And you can imagine it's servant leadership, transformational leadership, authentic leadership, agile. There's so many different versions, right?
Absolutely.
And what we tried to do was then, putting on our coach hats, we took that research summary and tried to frame it in such a way that this great academic work, by the way, that includes 22 countries around the world. So it's global research, academics from universities all over the world. We looked for a way to frame it so that it would be accessible and practical. We created a framework with what we considered to be the 9 most studied competencies or modalities of leadership. And then we incorporated the 2 things that I think are really crucial to any leader, which is coaching stories, like real life stories of how these apply, and then finally some practices. So each chapter has real practices that leaders can put into action, or they could work with a coach and use them. The book could be used by the leader by him or herself, or it could be used with a coach. But each chapter, each of the 9 areas that we focused on, has specific practices. So
Excellent.
The idea fundamentally was to take really rich research and translate it into something accessible.
And that you've done. So, and thank you for giving me an early copy. I have a digital copy. Normally I'd have it on my shelf here. Excuse me, sharing that. Now I'm getting all choked up talking to you. Normally I'd have that on display. So I have had a chance to read it, and it's precisely everything you described. So the idea that you have taken 15,000 specific scientific studies across 22 different countries, applied your 20,000 hours of coaching to distill it in a way that would be meaningful to not just those in the executive suite who want to understand leadership, no matter what level they're at, but also to those who will coach them. That's quite powerful. And as evidence of the quality of the research you put into this book, you have some very impressive endorsements. When you open it up and you see that none other than noted Harvard Business School professor Amy Edmondson has endorsed this book, global executive coaching leader and thinker Marshall Goldsmith has endorsed this book, and the CEO of the International Coaching Federation, Magda Mook, has
Right.
endorsed it. Just to say a couple of people, that tells you the quality of the book. And when people think about, well, who's the target audience? These people have said this is the book you want to read if you're in these lanes.
Yeah, I think what's unique is this approach that we took to leadership is that the vast majority, there's hundreds and hundreds of leadership books,
Mhm.
there and some really good ones. I mean,
Yes.
and I think in fact, you've written a couple of good ones yourself. So, I mean, there's some really good leadership stuff out there. But what we tried to do was to look at the studies that academic researchers have been doing on the different domains of leadership over the last couple of decades, and recognizing that the science, I mean, I think most people think of leadership as an art
Mhm.
and a science. It's a little bit of both.
Yes.
And a lot of the art of leadership is written about by coaches like yourself or me, and also by famous CEOs, Jeff Bezos, or the CEO Elon Musk, or the CEO of Starbucks. What was his name? I'm forgetting, but you know who I'm talking about.
Yes. I
Um,
can't believe I forget it. Howard Schultz.
Howard Schultz, yeah. So they write these wonderful stories, and they're very inspiring. And I think they can be really helpful to leaders, but every leadership dynamic is unique. So you can't just read Jeff Bezos' story and try to replicate that. That's a unique situation. It's inspiring, but it's a particular moment in time with a particular idea. It's like an entrepreneur's leadership. What we tried to do is look at the research that is more across the board, across the landscape of leadership, summarize the findings that these professors of 22 different universities across the globe have discovered, and then make that information, which is available in the public domain, but it's
Mhm.
not easy to read.
Yes.
It takes a lot of extra time and energy. We tried to summarize it in a way that is really simple, very accessible, and also creates a roadmap for leaders. Whether a
Now,
senior leader or a starting out leader, you can't really be good at everything right from the beginning, right? You have to
are
grow, you
you
have to
sure?
learn.
Because there are some folks that would argue with you on that one now.
They wake up one day and they're just an expert at every domain of leadership, right?
Yes. Yes.
I wish that were the case.
Well, you brought it down to 9 specific areas. Uh,
Right.
I won't ask you to give us all 9, but can you tell us the is there one that's more important than all of the 9?
That's a very difficult question, because I think it would depend on the situation that the leader
Okay.
is facing.
Okay.
But I will, to simplify the framing, one way we did try to think about it was 3 levels of complexity. As you think about leadership these days, in today's disrupted world, it's a very complex environment that every leader faces. Lots of change, artificial intelligence, and all the globalization and the political sphere is very complex. But there are definitely 3 levels at which every leader needs to operate. The first is within themselves. You have to start with yourself, right? You have to know yourself. You have to look at your strengths. You have to look at what your development opportunities are as an individual. Secondly, you have to look around at the people you interact with, your team, your subordinates, your board of directors, whoever is above, below, and around you. So the second level is your facing your others, the teams. And then finally, when you get to be a sophisticated leader at any level, you want to start to think about the system. You want to think
Mhm.
about the organization and the broader impact. So we did frame the book into 3 levels: self, other, and system, and then interspersed the 9 domains. So there's 3 in each of them.
So is it meant to
And
be an SOS on purpose, Jeff?
actually, Now that you say that, that's true. Yeah.
Hey, because I know for some leaders, where we are today, with all of, as you mentioned, the complexity that we're facing,
Right.
it is truly an SOS. And I love, as you mentioned several times, the idea that you've taken all this research that exists in the public domain, and it's available, right? Knowledge is exponential these days. But how can we get the specific component that we need in the moment in time that we need it? And so
Right.
you've brought it down to these three specific areas that leaders can challenge themselves and do it, or as you mentioned, be able to work with their coach and do this,
Right.
to be able to have a focused search, a focused approach to their leadership development.
Yes, absolutely. And the idea is to start where you are as a leader.
Mhm.
And you asked me, what is the most important of the nine? And if I was forced to answer the question, because I think they're all important, but the very first step into this roadmap we call conscious leadership. And consciousness is about awareness. So, starting point for all of us as leaders, whether it's you or me or anyone else that aspires or works in a leadership domain, is to know ourselves. And so seeing yourself clearly is always the place to start. And that means, your willingness to receive some feedback, whether it's through an assessment or through colleagues or through a coach, but getting some feedback so that you can understand your strengths and maybe your what we call shadows or your triggers or some of the things that are not quite so friendly about all of us. We all have them. We all have to become aware of them. We all have to look at ways we can be more present and more mindful. So conscious leadership is really the starting point, and then you leap forward from there into authentic leadership and relational leadership and positive leadership and servant leadership and ultimately transformational leadership. And we can decide what we want to key in on in this conversation.
This is why I invited you on, right? This is the area I'm so passionate about, because there are so many aspects of leadership. And to your
Right,
point, it depends on who the leader is, where they're leading, in types of the organization that they're leading, which country are they leading in, what is the demographics. So it's so dependent, and it's the idea that there's only one way to do it, one way to be successful, is wrong to make that conclusion. So it's
right,
good to have this exposure to a full breadth of leadership principles, leadership concepts, leadership theory, and then see how they should be applied. And you expose the reader to that, and then you show them what that looks like in practical application through these stories that you introduce the leaders
right.
to. Now, you also talk about the cost of not taking action. What does or how much does it cost organizations when they tolerate poor leadership?
Well, I think the statistics of engagement and burnout, lack of engagement and burnout. I'm not quite up on the latest McKinsey studies, but they haven't gotten much better over the last couple of years. And burnout is at an all-time high. Engagement is at an all-time low. And a lot of that, I mean, I hate to say it, but it really does trace back to the leader's effectiveness.
Yes,
I mean,
sir.
people look to their leaders to create the space, to create the tone, to create the culture that inspires, motivates, and has people have a desire to be engaged with them towards a goal. And there are, as you said, there is a lot of different ways to approach that. And what we do in our book is ask a leader who's starting to read the book to do a quick assessment of these nine capacities, or these nine capabilities, and think about what their strengths are. Because some leaders have a natural strength in some domains, but then to realize that there's a lot more that they can grow, they can learn, and then maybe go through the entire book step by step, or just choose. If there have been clients of mine who have looked at the 9 domains and said to me, Jeff, there's a couple things that jump out at me. Number one, I don't really understand what you mean by positive leadership. And number two, I'm not sure I'm very good at shared leadership. So let's talk about those two. And those are 2 of the chapters in the book. So we'll focus in on positive leadership. What does that really mean? And then we'll focus in on shared leadership. What does that really mean? And how can you apply that? So, you don't have to do all 9, but recognizing that in order to really increase the level of commitment, engagement, minimize the burnout of your team, it helps to really have an awareness of these different domains and how they could be put to use with your real life situation.
Thank you. And in addition to what you talked about in the book and also in our conversation about engagement, you shared a staggering number with me that I want to highlight. Everything that you said, then you put a price tag on it. You said it's costing $360 billion. And when we just think about how organizations are, doing layoffs or taking other maneuvers to shore up the bottom line, if we did something about leadership, that in and of itself would go a long way to shoring up the bottom line because it would solve all the things that you just mentioned.
Yeah, and I think it's also safe to say that the emergence of artificial intelligence is going to create additional complexity for leaders to make decisions about how to elevate the human element that is really crucial for their success, and to think about what could be replaced with artificial intelligence tools. And those human beings that are still working in the real world, even with AI, they need to be led in a way that they are inspired, they're connected, they're engaged. And so even as we become more technological in our organizations, we are still going to have to create environments where human beings are creative and innovative. So, your leaders are the ones that create that atmosphere. If you want to get innovation, you're going to need to be a good leader. If you want to have creativity, if you want to have transformation, if you want to be on the leading edge, your people are going to look to you as a leader to create that environment. So
Indeed.
knowing these themes is going to be really important.
Indeed. Now, you, as I mentioned earlier, aren't just an academic. You are that person who is a professor at the prestigious Harvard University, and I forgot the one you mentioned in Berlin and other places, New York University. But you also came out of the business world. So you
Right.
saw what this looked like. You worked at places like Goldman Sachs and other prestigious firms. Can you tell us how your unique lens of actually been in top corporations and now in top academia, how that really comes through to uh, help leaders to understand the steps they need to take?
Well, for me, my early corporate career was with Booz Allen and Hamilton, one of the big consulting firms. And when I was with them as a director of HR, I was very aware in early days of coaching these executives, whether it was the partners at Booz Allen or some of the senior executives at our clients. We worked at Citibank, we worked at Goldman, that they were brilliant. In many cases, they're really, really smart, really, really successful, highly educated, but they struggled too with how to motivate people. They struggled with feedback because it's sometimes painful to take feedback. And you think of yourself as being a straight A student or going to Harvard Business School, and then all of a sudden you get a coach one day like Dr. Jeffrey Hull, who says, well, maybe you're not as good at this as you thought.
And then we're crushed.
It's like humbling, right? And ironically, humility in our book is a big part of the chapter on servant leadership.
Mhm.
And things like humility are actually really key to success. So, what I learned early on in my corporate career was to be humble myself, to not get too full of myself as a leader or as a coach, but also to help my clients recognize that when they had some humility, they had some willingness to be transparent about their strengths and their opportunities, their growth opportunities. People are drawn to that. It's magnetic.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, instead of being cocky or having all the answers, the people they're leading are like, oh, wow, I love you. You're so human. You're so real. And that is a stepping stone into one of the chapters in the book, which is on servant leadership, being a servant of your people, stepping from behind, leading, as they say, from behind. It's actually one of the most sophisticated of all the leadership capacities.
So, Jeff, that's a far cry from what we learned in the 60s and 70s, where you were told you had to be hard, tough, and, a completely different breed. They would call that something very different today. So,
But there's a place for that too.
yes.
So that's the interesting thing. I don't believe in throwing baby out with the bathwater. So if you have an emergency, or you have an urgent situation, or you have a pandemic, for example, you do need to be a strong, authoritative leader, and there is a role for that. But that is, you're making the point, Eddie, which is really crucial, which is if you are just one type, you will not be successful in today's world. You need variety, you need agility, you need to be able to choose based on the context.
Yeah, one of my favorite analogies comes from Daniel Goldman's work, landmark article in Harvard Business Review, where he likened leadership to a set of golf clubs. That depending on where you are, you're going to pull up the right club for that part of the course. So you're just swinging the driver everywhere, being authoritative. That's not going to work so well. But to your point, a little humility, a little putter, a little gentle.
I love that.
That's what we need most of the time, right?
Right.
But when you get stuck in the sand edge, in the sand trap, you got to pull out that sand wedge, right? So it's having the appropriate range as a leader to know which one you should use when.
Right. Absolutely.
Fascinating. Well, I can't let you get out of here. You are the executive director of the Institute of Coaching, a prestigious organization that many coaches look to for the latest and greatest insights to guide us in the work that we're doing. Please just give us one morsel that you can share with us that we need to know about as we're facing the end of the year.
I mean, my favorite theme coming out of the book, the latest book with Margaret, is to think about sharing your leadership. So this is a sophisticated concept, but I like to leave this with people, which is transfer the I to we when you're leading. Elevate everyone around you to be a leader with you. We need to have more leaders in the organizations we work with. So rather than just the pinnacle leader at the top, think about if you're a boss, ask yourself, am I leading alone or am I leading with others? And if I need to lead with others, how do I do that? How do I shift from I to we, elevating, empowering, growing? At the end of the day, we want to create as many leaders as possible because we need those talents. We need that talent in today's world.
Absolutely beautiful. We appreciate that. Well, I've been talking to Dr. Jeffrey Hull, bestselling author of Flex and his new book, The Science of Leadership. He's a part of the Harvard faculty. The Thinkers 50 named him one of the top 50 coaches in the world. And he is a member of Marshall Goldsmith's esteemed 100 coaches. I neglected to
I think that's how I met you.
Yes, yes. Well, actually, I think you and I knew each other before that.
Oh, we did. That's right.
I met you at the Institute of Coaching's conference in 2015 or 2016. We became Marshall Goldsmith colleagues 5 years later.
That's right. That's right.
Yes. And then, of course, we mentioned that you are the executive director of the prestigious Institute of Coaching and the CEO of Leadership. What's the most important concept you want people to walk away from our conversation with today?
Leadership is a journey of learning and growth, like everything else in life. And there's a lot of good science. It's an art to be a good leader, but there is science, there is research, there is demonstrated evidence. And Margaret and I are trying to make that available to everyone.
Fantastic. Is there a quote that you use or a short story that you use that helps you keep leading?
My favorite mantra is the time to be present is when there's no time to be present.
I like that. I
I
like
use that
that.
with my clients every day. The
That's so
time
true.
to be focused is when there's no time to be focused. Variations. But basically, if you feel rushed, that's the time to take a deep breath, calm down, and refocus. Get present.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And where can people learn more about you?
Easily on LinkedIn, just put my name, Jeffrey Hull, or instituteofcoaching.org, or thescienceofleadership.com, or jeffreyhull.com. So a bunch of places.
Fantastic. We'll be sure to put that in the show notes.
Okay.
Thank you again for your time, for your wisdom and knowledge that you're sharing into the world. I appreciate you, and I know that the millions of coaches around the world uh, and leaders appreciate all the great work that you're doing.
Thank you, Eddie. It's great to think back and realize that we've been friends for many years. I wish you all the best with your podcast, with your writing, with your coaching, and it's been great fun.
Thank you. And thank you for listening. That concludes this episode, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Eddie Turner, reminding you that leadership is not about our position or our title. Leadership is an activity, leadership is action. It's not the case of once a leader, always a leader. It's not a garment that we put on or take off. We must be a leader at our core and allow it to emanate in all we do. So, whatever you're doing, always keep leading.